Eliza Mayfield stepped down from the westbound stage with one carpetbag, one sealed bride letter, and one return ticket folded in the lining of her glove. The Noon Bell station sat alone on the Powder River Road, half freight yard and half boarding house, with a water tank, a corral, and a counter where all travelers had to give their names before they went farther west. Eliza had been told a rancher named Corbin Vale would meet her there before sundown. She had crossed 4 states to marry him. Darius Pike looked at her letter for less than a breath before he dipped his pen in ink and wrote one word across his station book. Unclaimed. That is not true, Eliza said. Her voice stayed even, but her fingers tightened around the carpetbag handle. She was 27 years old enough to know when a man was making trouble on purpose, and tired enough from the road to fear it anyway. Pike was a narrow man in a brown coat too fine for the dust around him. His hair was slicked flat, his mustache trimmed sharp at the corners. He smiled like a man showing a knife without drawing it. Vale sent no wagon, Pike said. No rider, no notice. That makes you unclaimed under the agency rule. I have his letter. You have a copy of a letter, Pike tapped the counter, and you have an agency fee unpaid if the groom does not take delivery. The words hit the room harder than a slap. Mrs. Adele Crane, the widow who kept the boarding rooms, stood by the stove with a stack of tin plates in her hands. She looked at Eliza, then looked down at the plates. Eliza saw the look. It was not surprise, it was warning. I paid my fare, Eliza said. If Mr. Vale is not here, I will take the return stage. Pike held out his hand. Ticket. She hesitated. He leaned closer. Rules of the line, Miss Mayfield. Tickets must be verified at the counter. She drew the folded paper from her glove. Pike took it with 2 fingers, unfolded it, and tore the small return stub clean away before she could move. Eliza reached across the counter. Give that back. He dropped the torn stub into the coal scuttle behind him. No valid return fare, he said. Then he wrote another line in the station book. Kitchen labor until the agency fee is cleared. The station went quiet. At the far side of the room, a freighter had been weighing sacks of coffee for his wagon. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, with dust on his black hat and a scar that crossed one knuckle on his right hand. He turned from the scale slowly. What kind of contract needs a torn ticket? He asked. Pike's smile vanished. This is agency business, Rusk. So that was Micah Rusk. Eliza had heard his name twice on the road. A rancher freighter, a man who carried winter supplies farther than most teams dared, a man who did not talk much unless a matter needed cutting straight. Micah looked at Eliza, not with pity, and not with the kind of interest that made a woman wish she had worn a plainer dress. He looked as if he had seen something wrong done in daylight and meant to remember every piece of it. Miss, he said, did you give him that ticket by choice? He said it had to be verified. That is not what I asked. Eliza swallowed. No. Micah set the coffee sack down. Then I saw enough. Pike laughed once. You saw a bride arrive without a groom. Happens every season. And every season you find a way to profit from it. Mrs. Crane made a small sound by the stove. Pike shot her a look and she went still. Eliza hated that look. She hated that she understood it. A woman alone learned fast which faces belonged to fear and which belonged to cruelty. Micah walked to the counter and laid 2 silver coins on it. For her meal, he said. Not toward any fee, not toward any debt, a meal. Pike did not touch the coins. Eliza lifted her chin. I do not need charity. No, Micah said. His voice changed when he spoke to her. It lost the iron edge and became plain as weathered wood. But you need supper before you decide what comes next. That almost undid her. Not the coins, not the offer, the word decide. For 2 days, every person on the road had told Eliza what she was now. Bride, passenger, unclaimed, debt, labor. Micah Rusk was the first to leave a door standing open without pushing her through it. Pike leaned on the counter. Careful, Rusk. A man takes an unclaimed bride from my station, he takes her fee with him. Micah did not look away from Eliza. Any rancher who marries you will be lucky, Miss Mayfield, but a decent man will not make luck out of a trap. The room seemed to draw in one breath. Eliza should have thanked him. She should have said nothing more than a polite word, because a woman in trouble had to guard her wishes like matches in rain. Instead, the words escaped her almost too softly for speech. "I was hoping it would be you." Micah heard. She knew because his hand stilled on the counter. Pike heard too. His eyes narrowed with new calculation, as if her heart had become another figure in his book. Eliza wished she could take the whisper back, not because it was false, but because it was too true for a room like that. She had not known Micah's face before today. She had only heard from a driver on the Cheyenne Road that there was a rancher named Rusk who had written once to a bride agency and then withdrawn his name after a woman died on the Winter Pass. The driver had laughed and said, "That one thinks too much before he opens a gate." Eliza had carried that name like a foolish candle through the journey. Now Micah Rusk stood 3 feet away, and the candle was showing. If you enjoy clean, romantic Wild West stories like this, subscribe and ride along for the next frontier romance. Micah turned fully toward her. He did not smile. That would have been easier. Instead, his face held a careful ache. "Miss Mayfield," he said, "hope is not a debt either." Pike slapped the book shut. "Enough." The sound made Eliza flinch before she could stop herself. Micah saw that too. "Where is her trunk?" he asked. "In my storeroom until the fee is satisfied." "Then it stays untouched." "It stays mine to hold." Micah leaned both hands on the counter. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You touch her things, you and I will have a freight problem by morning." Pike's mouth tightened. "Your winter flour is due on my yard scale, your salt, your lamp oil, your nails, your coffee. A freight problem would hurt you before it hurt me." "Maybe." "Maybe," Pike said. Micah picked up one of his coins and slid it back into his vest. "Now the meal costs 1 coin." A teamster near the door coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Pike's face darkened, but he took the remaining coin. Micah looked at Eliza. "I have a ranch stop 4 miles north. There is a cookroom, a loft, and a married couple who work for me. You can eat there and decide whether you want to try the eastbound stage from Cottonwood tomorrow. I will not ask you for marriage. I will not ask you for work. I will not ask you to trust me before I earn it." Eliza looked toward Mrs. Crane. The widow's hands trembled around the tin plates. She parted her lips as if she might speak. Pike shifted 1 step, and she closed her mouth again. That silence answered more than any warning. Eliza lifted her carpetbag. "I will go with Mr. Rusk for supper." Pike's gaze slid over her like a lock clicking shut. "Your trunk remains." "For now," Eliza said. Micah opened the station door. Cold afternoon light spilled across the floorboards. Eliza walked out under her own power. She made herself do it slowly. She would not let Pike see her run. Outside, the freight yard smelled of dust, horse sweat, and pine crates. Micah's wagon stood loaded with coffee, seed sacks, and iron hinges. 2 bay horses waited in harness. A square-built teamster with red hair watched them from beside the near wheel. "Holt," Micah said, "Miss Mayfield rides up front." The teamster looked from Eliza to the station door. "Pike won't like that." "He has a lot of practice." Holt did not smile. "He controls the noon bell scale. Today he controls less than he did at noon." Eliza climbed onto the wagon seat before any man could offer a hand. Her legs shook when she sat down, but she folded her gloved hands and faced the road. Micah noticed. He did not comment. He climbed up beside her with enough space between them for a Bible and a loaded plate. That space steadied her more than a touch would have. When the wagon rolled out, Pike stood on the porch with the station book under one arm. Mrs. Crane stood behind him, half hidden in the doorway. Eliza looked back once. The widow's eyes followed her with a grief too old to belong to this afternoon alone. The ranch road bent north through sage and yellow grass. The station shrank behind them until it looked harmless, which was the way traps often looked from a distance. For a while, neither Eliza nor Micah spoke. Wheels groaned. Harness chains clicked. A hawk moved above the ridge like a dark nail drawn through the sky. Eliza knew better than to fill silence just because it frightened her. Micah was the one who broke it. "Did you know Corbin Vale?" Only by letter. How many letters? 3. Did any mention Pike? No. Did any mention Noon Bell? Only as the station where I was to be met. Micah nodded once, as if each answer was a nail going into a board. Vale sold his east pasture last month, he said. Left for Montana with a cattle outfit. He has no wife coming. Eliza's mouth went dry. Then who wrote to me? I do not know yet. Yet. The word was dangerous in a different way from Pike's words. It gave shape to help. I am not asking you to solve it, she said. I know. And I meant what I said in there before I knew enough to say it. His hands tightened on the reins. Eliza looked ahead. You do not need to answer. I am trying not to answer wrong. That made her turn. Micah kept his eyes on the road. A woman was supposed to marry me 3 winters ago, not by agency, a widow from Laramie. She was coming west with her brother. The pass closed early. Her brother lived, she did not. Eliza said nothing. It was not the sort of grief that wanted a quick word laid over it. After that, Micah continued, I wrote 1 letter to a bride office and tore it up before I mailed it. I thought wanting a wife was the same as asking a woman to risk the road for my loneliness. I decided a man could live with an empty chair better than with a grave he had invited. Eliza watched the reins move through his fingers. And yet you came into Noon Bell today. For coffee and hinges. And found trouble instead. I have found trouble before. Do you always invite it onto your wagon? This time the corner of his mouth moved, only when trouble has had its ticket torn. It was not a joke exactly, but it gave her one breath of warmth. Then he sobered. I need to say one thing plain. What you whispered back there matters, but not while Pike holds your trunk, your ticket, or any claim over you. I will not make myself the easier cage. Eliza looked down at her hands. She had spent the journey fearing she would not be wanted. She had not thought of the other danger, being wanted in a way that did not leave her free. Then what am I at your ranch? She asked. A guest until supper. After supper, whatever you choose next. And if I choose work? Then we speak of wages. And if I choose to leave? Then I drive you to Cottonwood. And if I choose to stay until I know what Pike has done? Then I put Holt in the bunkhouse, give you the loft key, and sleep in the tack shed. She almost said thank you. Instead, she said, that is a cold shed. I have slept colder for less reason. The wagon climbed a low rise. Beyond it, Rusk Ranch appeared in a fold of land where cottonwoods marked a creek. The house was not grand, but it was sound. A barn stood square against the wind. A cookroom leaned off the back of the house, its chimney already breathing smoke. It did not look like a rich man's place. It looked held together by labor and care. Eliza felt the first ache of wanting to belong somewhere, and hated how quickly it could become a weakness. A woman came out to meet them, wiping her hands on a flour sack apron. She was round-faced, gray-haired, and sharp-eyed. Micah Rusk, she called, tell me that is not trouble in a green traveling dress. This is Miss Eliza Mayfield, Micah said. Pike tried to mark her unclaimed. The woman's face changed at once. Then she is supper, she said, and a bed, and anything else decent people ought to do before they start asking questions. Maribel, Micah said to Eliza. She and her husband keep the house when I am on the road. Eliza climbed down before Micah could help. I can pay in mending if there is cloth that needs it. Mara looked her over, not cruelly, practically. There is always cloth that needs it, but first there is stew. Inside, the cookroom smelled of beans, onions, and yeast bread. Eliza sat at the end of the table, not because anyone put her there, but because she needed to see the door. Micah noticed and took the chair farthest from it. Small things mattered. A man who saw fear and did not feed on it was rarer than he should have been. Myra served stew. Holt came in last, looking unhappy and hungry at once. Pike sent a rider, he said before he sat. Says the Rusk teams are off the Noon Bell winter scale unless Miss Mayfield returns by dawn. Myra swore under her breath. Eliza put down her spoon. I will go. Micah looked at her. No. You said I choose. You do, but do not choose with Pike's hand at your back. Your ranch needs winter freight. My ranch needs me to be able to look my men in the eye. Holt pulled out a chair. Men like flour too. They do, Micah said, which is why we may have a hard month. Holt stared at him. A hard month for a woman you met today. The room tightened. Eliza stood. Mr. Holt is not wrong. Micah's eyes flicked toward her. She made herself continue. I will not be the reason your men lose wages or food. Pike will be the reason, Micah said. That may be true. It may not keep anyone warm. Holt looked away first. Mara set a plate down harder than needed. Sit, girl. If men could solve hunger by arguing, no ranch in Wyoming would need a cook. Eliza sat because her knees had begun to shake again. Micah did not press her. He ate 3 bites, then pushed his bowl back. Holt, he said, take the team to the East Corral after supper. We will talk route at first light. There is no route that does not touch Noon Bell. There is the old North Cut. Holt gave a hard laugh. Through Red Draw, with loaded wagons, that road eats wheels. Then we bring extra wheels. For her. Micah's voice stayed calm. For us. Eliza felt the difference. He was not making her a burden for the table to resent. He was making Pike the problem. After supper, Myra showed Eliza the loft over the cookroom. The space was small, with a slanted roof, a narrow bed, and a window facing the barn. A latch had been fixed on the inside. A quilt lay folded at the foot of the mattress. Micah put that latch in after his sister stayed here with a baby and a temper, Mara said. No story in it. There is always a story in a latch. Myra studied her, true enough. Eliza set her carpetbag down. It looked poor without the trunk beside it. Mrs. Bell, she asked, do you know a woman named Ruth? Mara's face went still. Ruth Bell. The name landed between them. I only heard Mrs. Crane almost say it, Eliza said, at the station before Pike looked at her. Mara gripped the banister. Ruth is my husband's niece. Eliza felt the room tilt. What happened to her? Mara did not answer quickly. When she did, her voice had gone flat with old anger. She came through Noon Bell last spring to marry a mine carpenter. The man never came. Pike said she owed fees. Then he said she'd worked them off. Then he said there were more. Last we heard, she was washing ore sacks behind his yard. Eliza's hand went to her glove, where the missing return stub had been. Did he tear her ticket? Mara closed her eyes. She wrote that she lost it. Maybe she didn't. Myra opened her eyes again and grief sharpened into purpose. Tell Micah. They found him in the barn, hanging harness by lantern light. He listened without interrupting. Holt stood near the door, arms crossed, face hard. Ruth never asked us to come, Holt said. Myra turned on him. A trapped woman does not always get to write her letters plain. Holt flushed. Micah took down a harness strap and examined the cracked leather. If Ruth is still there, Pike is not only trapping brides, he is moving them. To where, Eliza asked. Mining camps, road houses, places a woman with no ticket and no kin becomes cheap labor. The words were not sexualized. They did not need to be. The danger was clear enough without making it filthy. Eliza sat on an overturned nail keg. Then leaving tomorrow is not enough. Micah looked at her for a long moment. No, he said, it is not. Holt threw up both hands. And there goes the North Cut, the winter flower, and maybe the whole herd if snow comes early. Micah did not turn. Your wages are mine to worry over. They are mine to earn. Then earn them with a clear conscience. Holt's jaw worked. Paper matters in freight. Eliza stood. Paper mattered when Pike tore my ticket too. Did it make him right? Holt had no answer. She stepped closer to the lantern. I am not asking you to believe me because I cried. I did not cry. I am asking you to watch him. If Ruth says he tore hers too, watch where his hand goes next. A man repeats the motion that has served him. Micah's eyes shifted to her hands, then to the glove with the torn lining. That is good, he said softly. The praise touched her more than it should have. She looked away. It is only what seamstresses know. Repeated stitches make a pattern. Mara made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not carried so much pain. Holt still looked doubtful but not as sure. That was enough for one night. Later, Eliza sat in the loft with the quilt around her shoulders and listened to the ranch settle. Myra and her husband spoke low in the kitchen. Holt crossed the yard once, boots heavy. The barn doors thudded shut. Micah did not come into the house. Through the small window, she saw a lantern burning in the tack shed. He had meant what he said. The knowledge did not make her safe, not completely, but it made fear loosen its hand one finger at a time. In the morning, she woke before first light to the sound of someone splitting wood. She washed at the basin, pinned her hair under a plain hat Myra lent her, and went down to the cookroom. Micah was at the table with a map, 2 tin cups of coffee, and a piece of charcoal. "I can get you to Cottonwood by noon," he said. "From there, eastbound stage, you would be clear of Pike." The words were fair. That made them harder. Eliza sat across from him. "What happens to Ruth?" He did not answer. "What happens to the next woman whose groom does not come?" she asked. His face tightened. "I can go back without you. Ruth may not speak to you. She may not speak to you either. Maybe not, but if she looks at me, she will know I have stood on the same floor." Micah pushed the coffee toward her. "The safer road is Cottonwood." "I know. I need you to know it remains open." "I do." "Then choose with that in your hand." He took a folded bill and a silver coin from his pocket, placed them on the table, and pushed them beside the coffee. "Fair." Eliza stared at the money. No man had ever made leaving him so possible. For more clean Western romance, mail-order brides and lonely ranchers finding home, subscribe to the channel. The sentence passed like a narrator's breath between one turn and the next, and then the room settled again into the weight of choice. Eliza touched the fare but did not take it. "I choose Noon Bell," she said. Micah closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, fear stood there plainly. "Then we go together." "No." That surprised him. "If you ride in beside me like a guard, Pike will turn it into a quarrel between men," she said. "He will make me the thing being fought over. I need to speak to Ruth before he knows I am there." "That station has eyes." "Mrs. Crane's wash shed sits behind the kitchen. I saw the path when we left." "You notice that?" "I notice exits." He looked as if the answer hurt him. "Holt can drive the empty buckboard past the front yard," Eliza said. "You can be near enough to come if Pike moves, but I go to Ruth." "That is risk." "So is leaving." Micah looked at her for a long, steady moment, then nodded once. "All right." Not as you wish in a soft way. Not no dressed as concern. All right. 2 words that made room for her courage instead of replacing it. By mid-morning, the ranch had become motion. Myra wrapped bread in cloth. Holt hitched the buckboard with a face like a storm cloud. Micah checked the harness, then checked it again. Eliza borrowed a brown work dress from Mara, one plain enough to pass at a glance behind the station. She tucked her green traveling dress under the seat because it was the only fine thing she owned and because Pike had seen it. When Holt drove them within sight of Noon Bell, Eliza climbed down before the yard came fully into view. Micah was riding behind on a bay horse, far enough back to look like a freighter checking fences, close enough that she could feel his attention like a hand at her shoulder. "If Pike sees you," Holt said, "he will make noise." "Let him," Eliza said. Holt looked at her differently then, not warmly, not yet, but with the first grudging respect of a man who had expected fear and found a plan. Eliza crossed behind the station through waist-high dry grass. The wash shed stood where she remembered, half hidden by cottonwoods. Steam rose from 2 black kettles over a low fire. A woman in a gray dress stood bent over a tub, scrubbing something heavy and dark. "Ruth Bell," Eliza whispered. The woman froze. She was younger than Eliza expected, maybe 24, with raw red hands and a face made older by exhaustion. She looked toward the station, then at Eliza. "I do not know you." "No, but Darius Pike tore my return ticket yesterday." Ruth's lips parted. "He marked me unclaimed," Eliza said. "Mrs. Crane knew your name." Ruth backed away from the tub. "Do not say her name." "She did not send me." "Then go before he sees you." "He has my trunk." "Let him keep it." "He has your life." Ruth flinched as if the words struck skin. Eliza softened her voice. "I am not here to drag you into danger. I am here because if I leave with my own safety, he will use the same trick on someone else." Ruth stared at her. Her eyes were blue and hollow. "He said no one would believe me. He said my fare was gone because the stub was missing." Ruth's hand moved to her skirt pocket. Slowly, she drew out a small torn paper corner, worn thin from being handled. "I took this from the scuttle before it burned," she whispered. "Mine." Eliza did not reach for it. "Keep it," she said. "It belongs in your hand." Ruth's mouth trembled. "He sends me with the ore wagon tomorrow, says the mine camp cook died." Eliza's stomach tightened. "Tomorrow." "Dawn." A door slammed at the station. Ruth shoved the torn paper back into her pocket. "Go." "Will you speak if others are there?" Terror moved across Ruth's face. "I cannot." "Will you stand beside me if I speak first?" Ruth looked toward the yard again. "He has a book." "Books do not hold women. Men do when everyone else lets them." Ruth's eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. "Mrs. Crane let him." "I know." "She could have sent for my aunt." "I know." The station door opened. Pike's voice cut across the yard. "Ruth." Eliza stepped behind the shed wall. Ruth plunged her hands into the tub. Pike came around the corner, with Eliza's green traveling dress over his arm. For one wild second, anger burned so hot that Eliza nearly stepped out. He held her dress like property, like proof he had already won. "Where is she?" Pike asked. Ruth scrubbed without looking up. "Who?" "Do not play simple." "I wash what you bring." Pike tossed the green dress across a crate. "If Rusk hides her, he pays. If she comes back, she rides out with you. I can sell 2 debts as easy as one." Ruth bent lower over the tub. Pike stepped closer. "Look at me." Eliza held her breath. Ruth looked up. "If she comes to you," Pike said, "you tell me." Ruth said nothing. He reached toward her pocket. Eliza moved before she could think better of it. She stepped out from behind the shed and picked up a smoothing iron from the crate, not as a weapon raised, but as a weight held ready. "Take your hand away from her." Pike turned. His shock lasted only a moment, then pleasure replaced it. "There you are." Ruth went white. Eliza kept the iron at her side. "Where is my trunk?" "Safe." "No, locked." Same thing for women who do not know what is good for them. Eliza heard the wagon wheels then, Holt's buckboard turning in front of the station, Micah somewhere beyond the corner. Pike heard too, his eyes flicked toward the sound. "Rusk brought you back," he said. "Good, saves me the ride." "I brought myself back." "Even better, saves him the lie." He reached for her arm. Micah's voice came from the end of the shed. "Do not." Pike stopped. Micah stood with both hands empty. That mattered. He had not come in with a rifle. He had come in as a witness first. Holt stood behind him, still scowling but present. "This is private station business," Pike said. "Then stop doing it in the open," Micah answered. Pike smiled. "You have until dusk to return my debtor. After that, your teams do not cross my scale." "They may not need to. Every freight team needs noon bell." "We will see." Pike's smile thinned. "The ore wagon leaves at dawn. If Miss Mayfield wants to clear her fee with Ruth, I will allow it. If not, I send a notice to the agency and a lien to your freight account." Holt muttered something under his breath. Micah did not move. "You do that." "I will. And tomorrow, we will all be here to watch you try." Pike looked from Micah to Eliza, then to Ruth. His eyes rested longest on Ruth's pocket. Eliza saw it, Holt saw it too. Good, she thought, repeat the stitch. Pike picked up Eliza's green dress and walked back toward the station with it. Ruth made a broken sound. Eliza set the iron down. Micah came one step closer, then stopped. Are you hurt? No. That was a dangerous thing. Yes. I am proud of you. The words were so simple that she had no defense against them. She looked down at her hands. They were steady now. I was afraid, she said. Proud and afraid can stand in the same room. Ruth began to cry then, silently, as if permission had arrived too late and too gently. Mara Bell came before dusk with her husband, Amos, a thin man whose limp made every step look bought. When Ruth saw them, she folded in half like a cut string. Mara held her, and Amos stood facing the station with a fury that did not need volume. We should take her now, Amos said. Ruth shook her head against Mara's shoulder. He will say I stole from him. He will send men. Let him send, Amos said. Micah looked at Eliza. What do you think? It startled her, being asked in front of everyone. She took a breath. If Ruth leaves tonight, Pike keeps the story. He says she ran with debt. He says I ran too. He keeps the next woman. Tomorrow he will try to use the ore wagon in front of his own men. Holt rubbed his jaw. You want him to do it. I want him to show them what Ruth and I already know. Holt looked at Micah. That is thin. It is not thin if you watch his hands, Eliza said. Holt frowned at her. She held his gaze. You said paper matters in freight. Tomorrow behavior matters more. Holt said nothing. Micah looked toward the station yard. Then tomorrow we watch. That night nobody slept well. Eliza stayed in a back room at noon bell with Mara beside her and Ruth on a pallet by the wall. Mrs. Crane had given them the room without meeting Eliza's eyes. Pike had allowed it because he believed locked doors were his friends. He had forgotten that doors also kept witnesses in one place. Near midnight, Mrs. Crane came in with a lamp. Ruth stiffened. I brought broth, Mrs. Crane said. Myra stood. You brought silence for 8 months. The older woman flinched. Eliza watched her carefully. Mrs. Crane looked smaller without Pike beside her, not innocent, smaller. He said she had signed, Mrs. Crane whispered. Ruth sat up. You saw him take my ticket. Mrs. Crane closed her eyes. Myra's face hardened. Answer her. Yes. The word was almost soundless. Ruth looked away, as if the answer hurt more than the silence had. Mrs. Crane set the broth on the table. My boarding room is leased through his agency. If I crossed him, I lost the station. Eliza said, and Ruth lost herself. Mrs. Crane's eyes filled. Eliza did not soften. Tears were not payment. Tomorrow, Eliza said, you will speak where Holt and the drivers can hear you. He will throw me out. Yes, Mara said, and you will come to my sister's until you decide what decency costs next. Mrs. Crane looked at Ruth. I am sorry. Ruth's face went still. Be sorry standing up tomorrow. Mrs. Crane bowed her head. That was the first payment. Dawn came gray and cold. The ore wagon rolled into the yard before breakfast. It was a heavy thing with iron-rimmed wheels and high sideboards, driven by a broad man in a buffalo coat. 2 teamsters followed with Pike's crates. Holt stood by Micah's freight team, arms crossed. Micah waited near the water trough with his hat low and his face unreadable. Eliza stepped out of the back room in her green traveling dress. Pike had left it folded on the chair sometime before dawn. A small cruelty meant to remind her that he could touch what was hers. She wore it anyway. Not because it was fine. Because it was hers. Ruth came out beside her. Her gray dress had been brushed. Her hands were still raw. Myra stood on Ruth's other side, and Mrs. Crane followed 3 steps behind, pale as flour. Pike stood on the porch with his station book open. Ruth Bells, he called, or wagon. Ruth stopped. Eliza felt fear move through the woman beside her like a chill through water. She took 1 step forward. She does not go. Pike looked almost amused. Miss Mayfield, you are not in charge of debt. No, I'm in charge of my feet. She walked to the ore wagon and climbed onto the iron step. Micah shifted as if every part of him wanted to pull her down. He did not. He let her stand. That was his courage. Pike snapped the book shut. Get down. You marked me unclaimed yesterday, Eliza said, loud enough for the yard. You tore my return ticket, then said the missing stub made me a debtor. You handed me the ticket. To verify. Your word. Ruth Bell's word, too. Pike's smile died. Ruth had not moved. Eliza turned to her. Ruth, did he tear yours? Every sound in the yard seemed to stop. The horses, the chains, even the wind. Ruth looked at Pike. He lifted one finger, a small warning. Eliza saw Holt see it. Ruth reached into her pocket and drew out the worn ticket corner. He tore it, she said. Her voice shook, then it steadied. He tore it and said no groom meant no return. He said I owed the agency. He said if I told anyone, he would send me to a camp where nobody knew my name. Pike moved fast. He lunged from the porch, hand reaching not for Ruth's throat, not for Eliza, but for the ticket corner in Ruth's hand. Holt stepped forward. So did the ore driver. Pike stopped half a yard short. Eliza held up her gloved hand. The torn lining showed where her own ticket had been. Yesterday he reached for mine the same way, she said. Today he reached for hers. Pike's face twisted. Paper scraps and female panic, that is all. Mrs. Crane spoke from the porch. No. The word cracked across the yard. Pike turned slowly. Mrs. Crane gripped the porch rail. I saw him tear Ruth Bell's ticket. I saw him tear Miss Mayfield's. I kept quiet because I was afraid of losing my rooms. Pike's eyes went flat. Adele. She shook her head. No more. It was not enough to make her innocent, but it was enough to change the air. Pike opened the station book and jabbed a finger at a page. They owe fees, both of them. Ruth Bell signed kitchen labor. Eliza Mayfield is unclaimed. The ore wagon takes labor west under my authority. Your authority ends where my team begins, the ore driver said. Pike stared at him. The driver spat into the dust. I haul ore, not women. Holt moved to the loaded crates by Pike's porch. For a moment, Eliza did not understand what he was doing. Then he lifted one crate down, set it in the dust, and looked at the other teamsters. No team for Pike today, he said. One by one, the men set down their loads. Pike's mouth opened. No sound came out. Then he found one. Rusk, he shouted, you will lose every pound of freight you own. Micah walked forward at last. He did not come to stand in front of Eliza. He came to stand beside the wagon step where she could see him and everyone else could too. I already chose the north cut, he said. You cannot feed a ranch on pride. No, Micah said, but I will not feed it through you. Pike pointed at Eliza. She is the cause of this. Eliza looked over the yard. At Holt, at Ruth, at Mrs. Crane, at the teamsters who had finally put down Pike's crates. No, she said, you are. Pike made his last move then. He snatched Eliza's trunk key from his vest and strode toward the storeroom. If she wants her property, she pays. Eliza climbed down from the wagon. Micah reached one hand toward her, then let it fall. Her choice. She followed Pike to the storeroom door. The yard followed behind her. Pike jammed the key into the lock. You think a few wagon men scare me? No, Eliza said. I think losing what they carry scares you. His hand paused. She stepped close enough to speak quietly, but not privately. Everyone could hear. Give me the trunk. Give Ruth her wages. Give Mrs. Crane back whatever paper binds her room to your agency. Or every team here leaves with Micah, and every station west hears that noon bell cannot keep drivers. Pike laughed. You cannot make that promise. Holt answered before Micah could. She does not have to, I can. The teamsters murmured behind him. Pike looked past Eliza then, and saw the thing he had truly lost. Not an argument. Obedience. His face changed. It emptied in a way that frightened her more than rage. He unlocked the storeroom. Eliza's trunk sat against the far wall. Ruth's small bundle sat beside it. On the shelf above them lay a thin black ledger tied with string. Pike saw Eliza look at it and grabbed for it. Mrs. Crane moved first. She stepped between Pike and the shelf. Her whole body shook, but she stayed there. "That book stays with the station," she said. "Move." "No." Pike raised his hand. Micah caught his wrist. It was the first time Micah touched him, and it lasted only long enough to stop the blow. "Do not mistake restraint for permission," Micah said. Pike tried to pull free. He could not. The ore driver took the ledger from the shelf and set it on the counter in plain view. He did not read it aloud. He did not need to. The names tied inside it were not the proof. The women standing in the yard were. Mrs. Crane untied the string with clumsy fingers. "I will write to the stage company," she said, "and to the agency office in Cheyenne." Eliza turned to her. "No, you will ride with Amos Bell today and say it to a person who can ask questions. Ink is easier to ignore than a woman with a witness." Mrs. Crane swallowed. "Then I will ride." That was the second payment. Pike looked at Ruth. "You still owe board." Ruth lifted her chin. "Then sue me where my aunt can hear it." A teamster laughed once, sharp and surprised. Pike looked at Eliza. "And you, Vale never ordered you. You are nobody's bride." The words were meant to cut. They did not land where he wanted. Eliza glanced at Micah. His face had gone still, but his eyes held hers. He did not rescue her from the sentence. He let her answer it. "Then I am nobody's property," she said. The yard went quiet in a different way. Micah's mouth softened, not into a smile, but into something more serious. Pike had no answer left that anyone would carry for him. By noon, the Noon Bell yard had changed shape. Pike's crate sat unloaded by the porch. Micah's team rolled north with Holt in the lead. The ore wagon left empty of women. Ruth sat beside Mara in Amos Bell's wagon, holding her ticket corner in one hand and her bundle in the other. Mrs. Crane sat stiffly in the back, the black ledger on her lap, and the fear of consequence finally costing her more than silence. Pike stood by the station steps as the wagons moved out. He did not ride away in dignity. He did not vanish into some easy later punishment. He stood there watching his money leave, his drivers leave, his witnesses leave, and his room key turn useless in his hand because Mrs. Crane had locked the office behind her and taken the ledger. Eliza rode in Micah's wagon with her trunk at her feet. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The road north was rougher than the road from Noon Bell. Twice, Holt had to climb down and move stones. Once a wheel sank so deep in a rut that all the men pushed while Eliza and Myra steadied the load. It was not triumphant work. It was dirty, slow, and costly. That made it feel honest. Near sunset, they reached Rusk Ranch. Myra took Ruth inside first. Amos went with them. Holt led the teams toward the barn, still grumbling but quieter now. Micah lifted Eliza's trunk down and set it on the porch. "The eastbound stage from Cottonwood comes through tomorrow afternoon," he said. Eliza looked at him. "You still mean to take me?" "If you choose it." After all this. Especially after all this. The answer made her throat tighten. He removed his hat and held it in both hands. Dust marked his hair at the temples. "Eliza, what you whispered at Noon Bell has been in my mind every hour since." Her own name in his voice felt like a step across a creek. "And," she asked, "and I want to answer it like a man who deserves the asking." She looked toward the house. Warm light showed through the cookroom window. Ruth sat inside with Myra, a bowl in her hands, not safe forever, not healed in one day, but no longer in Pike's wagon. "What would that answer be?" Eliza asked. Micah took a breath. "That I hoped it too." The words were quiet. They were not enough by themselves. Eliza knew that now. A whisper could open a gate, but it could not build a home, not without action, not without choice, not without cost already paid and more honestly named. Micah seemed to know it too. "But hope is not a proposal," he said. And rescue is not courtship. If you stay tonight, you stay as a guest. If you leave tomorrow, I drive you. If you come back someday, I open the gate. If you remain." He stopped, then started again. "If you remain, I ask properly in daylight after you have had time to know the ranch when no one is chasing you." Eliza stepped onto the porch. Her trunk stood beside her, recovered but no longer the most important thing she owned. "And if I ask you not to wait too long?" His eyes lifted to hers. "Then I will be brave sooner." She smiled for the first time since noon bell. It came slowly, like a lamp turned up. The next day, Micah hitched the light wagon and drove Eliza to Cottonwood himself. He did not try to fill the road with persuasion. He pointed out the creek crossing that flooded in spring, the ridge where snow came early, the schoolhouse that needed a new roof, and the small cemetery where his parents lay. He told her the truth of the place, not the advertisement. Cottonwood was no more than a store, a church, a blacksmith shed, and a stage sign leaning in the wind. The eastbound coach stood there with fresh horses and a driver drinking coffee from a tin cup. Micah bought Eliza a ticket. He put it in her hand. "No torn stubs," he said. She turned it over once. The paper was whole. "You are making this difficult," she said. "Leaving. Staying." His face changed, but he did not step closer. "Good," he said. "It should be a decision, not a drift." The driver called for passengers. Eliza looked at the coach. She could climb in. She could go east with her trunk and her name. She could write to cousins in Ohio and say the West had been a mistake almost made permanent. She could also return to the ranch where a man had slept in a tack shed because distance mattered, risked winter freight because freedom mattered, and bought her ticket because choice mattered more than his wanting. She folded the ticket once and held it out. Micah shook his head. "Keep it." "Why?" "So both of us remember you can use it." Eliza closed her fingers around the paper. "Then take me back to the ranch." His breath left him. "Eliza, you said if I remained, you would ask properly." "I did. I am remaining long enough to hear whether you know how." For the first time, Micah Rusk laughed. It was not loud, it was not polished. It sounded like something unused but still good. He helped her into the wagon because she offered him her hand. That mattered too. When they reached Rusk Ranch, the whole place was in motion. Holt was unloading damaged wheel rims from the north cut. Mara had Ruth peeling potatoes at the kitchen table, not as debt, but as family work shared by everyone who ate. Amos was mending a hinge on the smokehouse. Mrs. Crane was not there. She had gone with Amos to Cottonwood to give her statement to the stage company writer. Before she left, she had placed her station lease on Mara's table and said she would not return to noon bell unless Pike was gone. It did not erase what she had done. It did make silence more expensive than truth. 3 days later, the first answer came in daylight. A stage company rider reached Cottonwood with Mrs. Crane beside him in Amos Bell's wagon, and the black ledger wrapped in oilcloth on the seat between them. By afternoon, Holt, the ore driver, Micah, Eliza, Ruth, and half the men who had dropped Pike's crates stood in the noon bell yard while the rider read the company order aloud from the porch. Darius Pike was suspended from the agency room. The transfer book was removed from his counter. The station seal, the room key, and the bride route ledger were taken out of his hand in front of the drivers he had counted on. When he ordered the ore wagon loaded anyway, the driver folded his arms and said, "Not under your name." Pike tried Holt next. "You owe your freight account to this yard." Holt looked at Eliza before he answered, not because she needed to speak for him, but because he knew who had made him see the trap plain. "My account goes north," he said, "with Rusk." 2 other teamsters signed their winter haul through Rusk's north cut for less profit and more danger, but with their own names under it. Pike still had a building to stand in for a while, but no men to carry his orders, no key to the agency room, and no women hidden behind his book. Consequence did not arrive as a clean bell. It arrived as men changing routes, women speaking names, and doors closing to a man who had once expected every door to open. Eliza helped Ruth write 3 letters, one to the mine carpenter who had never come, not to plead, but to end the question, one to the agency office naming what Pike had done, one to herself at Mara's suggestion, stating that she owed no man her labor for a torn ticket. "Why write it to herself?" Holt asked from the doorway. Ruth looked up, "Because I need to see my own name with no debt beside it." Holt removed his hat. "Fair." That was as near an apology as he could manage then. A week later, he did better. He handed Ruth the wages from 2 days of hauling she had helped sort and said, "This is pay, not kindness." Ruth took it without thanking him too much, which Eliza thought was exactly right. Micah did not ask Eliza properly that week. He waited. Not in neglect, in proof. He asked what work she wanted and paid her when she helped Mara sew canvas covers for the freight loads. He showed her the account slate and made sure her name did not appear under favors. He asked whether she wished to write east, and when she said yes, he drove the letter himself to Cottonwood. He also wanted her. She saw it in the way he stopped at the cookroom door when she laughed with Myra. She saw it in the way his eyes found her first when a wagon came in. She saw it one cold evening when Holt made some foolish remark about brides bringing trouble and Micah said, calm and final, "Miss Mayfield brought truth. Trouble was already there." That was the first time Eliza felt chosen in front of another man. Not claimed. Chosen. On the 9th evening, snow threatened the ridgeline, though it was early in the season. The sky turned iron. The ranch hurried to cover tools, bring in wash, and secure the north shed. Eliza carried a stack of folded canvas to the barn and found Micah inside, tying down the repaired harness. "Holt says the north cut may hold," she said. "Holt says many things before he believes them." "He believes you now." "He believes you." She set the canvas on a barrel. "That frightens him more." Micah smiled, then grew quiet. The barn smelled of hay and leather. Snow light silvered the cracks between the boards. "I bought another stage ticket today," he said. Eliza went still. He took it from his vest and held it out, whole, untorn. "For spring," he said, "in case winter closes before you decide." She looked at the ticket, then at him. "Micah Rusk." "Yes." "Are you trying to court me or send me away?" "Both, if both are what honor requires." She should have laughed. Instead, tears stung her eyes. "That is a very troublesome kind of honor." "I know." "What if I do not want the spring ticket?" "Then it stays in the drawer." "What if I do not want any ticket?" He took one step closer, then stopped. Always that stopping, always that waiting for her to close the rest. "Then I ask." "In the barn?" "No," his face warmed. "I can do better than the barn." "Good." He looked toward the house. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow." It snowed before dawn, a thin early snow that dusted the porch rails and melted wherever the kitchen smoke touched the roof. The ranch came awake under a hush. Mara made biscuits. Ruth laughed at something Amos said. Holt cursed the cold and then fed the horses anyway. Micah shaved. That was how Eliza knew he meant to be formal. He came to the cookroom door after breakfast in his clean shirt, dark vest, and black hat brushed free of dust. He looked more frightened than he had in Pike's yard. Myra saw him and pressed her lips together hard, pretending not to smile. Ruth took one look and carried a pan outside for no reason at all. Eliza stood by the table with flour on her sleeve. "Miss Mayfield," Micah said. "Mr. Rusk, would you walk with me to the porch?" "Is the porch better than the barn?" "I have hopes." She followed him out. The porch faced the yard, the barn, the road to Cottonwood, and the north track toward the station. It faced every choice at once. Micah stood at the bottom step while she remained on the porch. He did not block the door behind her. He did not stand between her and the road. "Eliza," he said, "I will not ask you to marry me today." That startled her enough that she blinked. He saw it and hurried on. "I want to. That is not the question. But wanting is not the same as readiness, and you crossed half the country to be trapped by a man's paper. I will not answer that with another paper before you have had a season to breathe." Her throat tightened. "Then what are you asking?" He removed his hat. "May I court you properly? In daylight? With Mara watching too much, Holt pretending not to, Ruth laughing at me, and a stage ticket in your drawer if you ever decide no. Eliza looked past him to the road. The stage line lay somewhere beyond the low hills. Open, real, hers. Then she looked at the man who had made it real and still hoped she would not use it. Yes, she said. Micah's eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, there was no triumph in his face, only gratitude so deep it looked almost like grief. May I take your hand? She held it out. His palm was warm despite the cold. He did not pull her down the steps. He held her hand where she stood. Any rancher would be lucky, he said quietly. She smiled. You said that already. I was speaking about a foolish, imagined man. And now I am asking to become wiser. Eliza stepped down one stair because she chose to. I was hoping it would be you. This time she did not whisper. Behind the kitchen window, Myra made a sound that was certainly not a cough. Ruth laughed outright. Holt walked past the barn with a bridle in his hand and said, "About time," as if he had not resisted every mile of the road that brought them there. Micah looked embarrassed and happier than Eliza had known a man could look without moving at all. The weeks that followed did not turn easy just because courtship had a name. The North Cut broke 2 wagon wheels before the first hard freeze. Pike tried once to send a notice claiming Rusk had stolen agency property. The notice came back with 3 Teamsters' marks, Ruth's statement, Mrs. Crane's statement, the ore driver's refusal, and the stage rider's own note that Pike no longer held the agency seal. After that, Pike left noon bell. He did not leave with honor. He left while the yard watched, carrying 1 valise and no ledger, with no drivers willing to haul for him, no boarding widow willing to shelter him, and no office key left in his pocket. Mrs. Crane took work at Mara's sister's place through winter. Ruth did not forgive her quickly. No one asked her to. When spring came, Mrs. Crane stood in church at Cottonwood and said plainly what fear had made her do. She lost the station, but kept the first honest room of her life, which was small and hard and maybe enough to begin with. Ruth stayed at Rusk Ranch until she chose a place with Mara's sister, not because anyone sent her away, because she wanted a town where her own wages could buy her own window curtains. Eliza stayed through winter. She used the spring ticket once. Not to leave for good. To ride to Cottonwood alone, mail a letter east, buy blue thread, drink coffee at the store counter, and ride back on the same coach because returning meant more when leaving had been possible. Micah waited at the ranch gate when the stage brought her back. He did not pretend he had not worried. She loved him better for that. Still here, she called from the coach step. Still hoping, he answered. She laughed, and the driver handed down her parcel of thread. By late spring, the creek ran high and bright, and the North Cut held under wagons that had learned its bad places. Holt began saying it was a better route than Noon Bell, though he said it like a man personally insulted by being wrong first. The route cost them. That was the part no song would keep, but Eliza did. 1 wheel broke on a wet grade. 2 sacks of flour spoiled when a wagon tilted in a creek crossing. Micah sold 3 young steers earlier than he wanted to pay the men full wages after the delay. When Eliza found the bill of sale on his desk, she carried it to the barn and waited until he finished checking a mare's foot. "You should have told me," she said. Micah took the paper and did not pretend not to understand. "I did not want you counting your freedom in cattle. And I do not want you hiding the cost of it from me like I am too fragile to know." He leaned one shoulder against the stall post. Fair. The word pleased her less than his face. He looked chastened, not because she had caught him, but because he had almost made a decision for her comfort without her consent. "If I stay," she said, "I stay with the truth of this place. Broken wheels, lost flour, sold steers, men who grumble, women who remember. Roads that do not turn easy because we wish them to." "If you stay," he said carefully, "I will tell you the cost before I pay it when I can. And when you cannot, I will tell you after, before pride makes a liar of me." That was not poetry, it was better. It was a working promise plain enough to hang weight on. She handed back the bill of sale. "Then I will help sew the new canvas covers for the next run, and you will pay me." "I was going to say it anyway." His mouth curved. "I will pay you." That evening he placed $3 beside her sewing basket, not as a gift, not as courtship, but as wages. Eliza left the coins there until morning, where everyone could see them. By breakfast, Holt had seen them, Ruth had smiled at them, and Mara had nodded once as if a board had been set true. It was a small receipt, not the final one, but it proved that Micah Rusk could want a woman and still pay her fairly for work that helped him. Eliza folded the coins into a handkerchief and tucked them into her trunk, not as a token of escape, but as proof that her labor had her own name on it. One evening, Eliza stood in the cookroom doorway sewing a patch on Micah's glove. He came in from the yard, stopped at the threshold, and looked at her as if the sight had interrupted him. "What?" she asked. "I am trying to decide whether to ask in here or on the porch." Her needle paused. "Ask what?" He smiled a little. "I think you know." Her heart moved hard. "The porch," she said. "It faces the road." "I thought you might say that." They went out together. The sunset lay low behind the barn, gold on the rails, red on the windows, soft on the road that had once carried her in fear and then carried her back by choice. Micah did not kneel. The ground was muddy, and Eliza would have laughed if he ruined his trousers trying to look like a picture in a magazine. He stood before her with both hands open. "Eliza Mayfield," he said, "will you marry me when you are ready, not because a letter sent you, not because a ticket failed you, not because a man trapped you, but because you choose this ranch and this life and me?" She looked at the road. She looked at the door. She looked at Micah. "Yes," she said, "and I am ready." He let out a breath that sounded like winter leaving a room. She took his hands first. Then he drew her close enough for her forehead to rest against his vest, and they stood that way in the open, with the house behind her and the road before her and neither one stealing the other. There was no need for a crowd, no need for Pike's defeat to be retold, no need for the town to clap. The receipt had been written in behavior long before the proposal, a whole ticket, an open road, a man waiting where a lesser man would have grabbed, and a woman returning because she wanted to. They married in June at Cottonwood Church with Ruth beside Eliza and Holt standing with Micah, pretending dust had got in his eyes. After the service, Mrs. Crane came forward last. She did not ask Ruth for forgiveness. She did not ask Eliza to soften the past. She handed Eliza a folded paper. The agency office wrote back, "Pike's name is struck from their books in Cheyenne and Laramie both. I thought you should have the first copy." Eliza took it, read it once, and passed it to Ruth. "Keep it," she said. Ruth pressed the paper to her chest, not as proof she needed to be believed, but as proof that the old claim had no place left to stand. Micah's hand found Eliza's, gentle and public. That night when the wagon brought them home, Micah stopped at the ranch gate. The house lamps glowed warm. The barn doors were open. The road behind them was darkening into blue. "Do you want me to carry you over the threshold?" he asked, looking suddenly uncertain. Eliza thought of Noon Bell, of Pike turning a threshold into a trap, of Micah standing aside again and again until a doorway could mean choice instead of capture. "No," she said softly. He stepped back at once. She smiled and took his hand. "Walk beside me." They crossed the yard together. At the porch, Micah opened the door and waited. Eliza stood with one hand on the latch, listening to the house breathe. Then she stepped inside first, turned, and held the door open for him. Subscribe for more clean, romantic Wild West stories where rejected brides, lonely ranchers, and brave frontier women find home. Micah entered only when she made room. Eliza closed the door from the inside, not because the world had become harmless, but because this time the house had answered her hand. The road was still there when she wanted it, and the man beside her had waited until she chose him.